Fallout 5 is still many years away from release. This leaves us with a lot of time to look back and think about what we will be seeing for the next title in the Fallout series. And what is up guys, Andrew from the Den Men here, and today I want to take an in-depth look at the next location for Fallout 5. We've been everywhere from the Mojave Wasteland to the Capital Wasteland and even West Virginia, so if you're excited, make sure you hit that like button and comment where you think Fallout 5 will take place. We will be taking a look at a couple of potential locations, and it doesn't just have to be for Fallout 5, this goes for any spin-off games like New Vegas as well. But with that being said, we have a lot to go over, so kick back, grab that bottle of Nuka-Cola, and let's get right into today's video. The first location I want to talk about is none other than the Big Apple or New York City. For those who don't know, New York City was a potential location for Fallout 4, but they decided to go with Boston because there was a lack of technology for the ambitious plans for a game set in that area. Well, they definitely wouldn't be running into a technology problem anymore, so New York City would be a slam dunk in my opinion. We haven't heard much about the region of New York in the Fallout game, so there's a lot of potential here to go in a lot of different ways. One thing I will say though is that a lot of the city would most likely be in rubble because it would no doubt have been hit hard during the Great War. There are a lot of positives and negatives here because on one hand, people might think that if it's all rubble, then there would be nothing in New York City itself. This is most likely very far off from being true. Take a look at the city of Boston, and even though we did have a highly irradiated area of the glowing sea, there were still a lot of structures still standing. It would likely be similar to that, but more dense and way more design put into it. Just think of the amount of detail that could be put into a game set in New York City. We could see people settling in fallen skyscrapers, raiders hiding in the rubble awaiting their victims, and potentially verticality taking on a bigger role. The idea of having more verticality in a game like Fallout is an interesting idea, and one that I think would fit quite well with this. I can really see us having to fight through a lot of the skyscrapers and possibly even being able to jump from rooftop to rooftop in some circumstances. Obviously, Bethesda would take this idea of verticality and make it a lot more in-depth, but we will just have to wait and see on that end. A good way for Bethesda to really lean into the location of New York City is to have both high skyscrapers, but also deep subway tunnels. There's a lot of potential with this because there's so much to the city that you can't even see when above ground. I would really like to see a maze-like environment for the subway area because it would certainly hold many secrets. A game set in New York City would need to be in depth. There is so much potential here, and I hope Bethesda really leans into making this one of the best we have ever seen. The next one I want to talk about is the possibility of seeing San Francisco in another Fallout game. Personally, I love the idea of returning to the West Coast for a mainline Fallout game, and even though we have seen San Francisco before in Fallout 2, I think there's still a lot of potential for it to make a return. Since Fallout 2 though, we have actually had a number of references towards it. During the mission where we go inside Kellogg's brain, we can see the Golden Gate Bridge in the distance from one of the windows, and an even more obscure one in Fallout New Vegas. During the game, there was supposed to be a line of dialogue from one of the NPCs that states that San Francisco had been destroyed since the events of Fallout 2, but Bethesda asked Obsidian to remove it so they can use the city in future games. Does this pave the way for a game to be set there? Possibly, but let's actually talk about the location itself. Since it was already featured in a mainline Fallout game, there are actually a couple of things we already know about it. For one thing, it is noted that San Francisco has always been a weird city even before the Great War. It was hit hard during the Great War, which led to much of the city being left in ruin. The city was refounded after the war by Chinese submariners that drifted into the San Francisco harbor after their submarine suffered system failure from the atomic war. What is now known as the Shy climbed out and began rebuilding the city with what few survivors they had, scrapping their beach submarines to create their Steel Palace. As far as we know, the city is split up into 6 districts with the Steel Palace, Hubologist Command, Chinatown, the Golden Gate Bridge, the Chi-Town Docks, and the PMV Valdez. The Steel Palace is the main base of the Chi. It is a small, reinforced structure protected by heavily armed guards. Then there's Chinatown, which is also called Chi-Town. This one suburb of San Francisco has been claimed by the Chinese inhabitants and made into the focal point for a lot of the major city. The Chi-Town Docks feels a lot like Good Neighbor in a lot of areas. They are this rusted over, rundown place for the scum of the city to populate. Then there's the Golden Gate Bridge, which there isn't really much to talk about, but just under it lies the Hubologist headquarters. Anybody who played through the Nuka World questline in Fallout 4 would have likely encountered a fanatical group who just so happened to be known as the Hubologist. It is very interesting that they made their way over from San Francisco all the way to the Commonwealth. Well, it just so happens that their HQ is found in the city of San Francisco and could tie the two places together very well. Our last major location is a tanker on the Chi-Town docks called the PMV Valdez. This was a major part to the story of Fallout 2 because the only way the player could get to the Enclave's oil rig was by using the tanker to get there. I doubt it would play that big of a role if we saw a game in San Francisco, but I do imagine we'll see it in some regard. I also want to point out that the Brotherhood of Steel is said to have somewhat of a presence in the region with an outpost situated within the city. But overall, San Francisco keeps a very low profile on the western side of the USA. The main inhabitants, or the Chi, don't like to be bothered all that often and avoid any confrontation with the NCR. As for the city itself, it is a dangerous one with many mutations lurking and could make for a very challenging yet fun adventure if we were to see a game set in San Francisco. New Orleans is particularly interesting to me because it would be wildly different from anything we have seen before. A lot of the other places would be very urban with a huge cityscape, but New Orleans could tap into that Far Harbor vibe, which gets me very excited. Far Harbor had a very different environment with swamps, bogs, and a lot of water in general. A location like New Orleans could take this up to 11 with a large portion of the map feeling very overgrown and highly mutated. I think there is a good chance that we see plants and fungal growth playing a big part in the environment of the game. I can only imagine having giant acidic plants or spores that cause hallucination for the player. I can really see them having entire swamps where you cannot see the sun and all that you can distinguish are the level of trees on top of one another. As you can probably tell by now, if we were to see a game set in New Orleans, I wouldn't want it to feel like anything we have seen before. Yes, would it still have that ruined environment? Obviously, but instead of everything being war-torn, I would want it to feel like nature has taken over. There isn't much we know about the location of New Orleans in the Fallout franchise, so there is a lot of potential to go all out for it. They don't have the same constraints as something like San Francisco, and I'd be excited to see what they come up with. What we do know is that the areas surrounding New Orleans were completely swamped by a large mire which formed when 3 lakes flooded the area. This could lead to a lot of underwater exploration and potentially underwater combat. I can only imagine what type of new creatures mutated to walking, but also which of them is still lurking underneath all of the irradiated water. I really like the idea of Bethesda taking water features to the next level, and a game set in New Orleans would be the perfect location. A big part of every Bethesda game is location. The setting of the game sets the story for everything that follows, including quests, characters, and even themes. If we take a look at Fallout 4, the Boston area was a really unique one with a lot of different regions throughout the game. They were also able to level it really well too by making it harder the further south you travel. Bethesda was able to combine the rural and more tame environments like the area surrounding Sanctuary and make it the starting area, while the center of Boston would be a much harder zone. The same can be said with a region like the Glowing Sea. It is easy to see why it would be an endgame location with it having the largest radiation field in the game. I would like them to follow this trend in Fallout 5 by synergizing the leveling with how crazy an environment looks. The 3 locations we talked about today could all make for some really unique environments, but also have some really interesting stories as well. Fallout 5 could go anywhere, but wherever the game is going to take place, I hope we see a distinct feel that sets it apart from anything we have seen before. But that is all for me now though, guys. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Comment any videos you want to see in the future, and I'll see you all next time.